无边无际的大海，那海面波涛汹涌，我们不畏惧艰险，让我们手牵着手，让我们肩并着肩，美好明天在眼前。
Здравствуйте, my fair weather friends, and welcome back to another episode of Kachimuchi's Game and Spooks. As I am now picking up the shattered pieces of my dreams that was my nursing career, I decided to take a break and thought I'd narrate a creepypasta. Speaking of, today's featured creepypasta is Ed, and Eddy, the game. That's right, a gaming creepypasta without an EXE in the title. That alone makes it quite original. Similar to the Root Pain creepypasta I recently narrated, this story is an anonymous chronicle about a certain fan game found on a sketchy website. And though that synopsis may seem generic nowadays, it's a lot better than the alternative of Ed, and Eddy coming right out of a game and killing the narrator. And who knows, perhaps in this story, Ed, and Eddy will be more of an accessory than a theme. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. I'm simply a sucker for internet-based creepypastas. Is this short creepypasta enough to regain my trust in small fan games? Well, there is only one way to find out. And so, without any further ado, let us begin Ed, and Eddy, the game, by Relzar123. It all started on 4chan a few years ago, around 2006. An anonymous user on 4chan left a post on one of 4chan's forums. It said, quote, "Hello, I walked hard on this game. Pleasure pulls it. It did very fun." Unquote. It also included a link to a .rar file on Mediafire. Most people would disregard the post due to its poor spelling, and if they did visit the link, they would see that the file was called Ed, and Eddy, the game, and forget about trying it. But the ones that did play it were in for one hell of a ride. Most of the reactions to the game were quite different than the type one might expect. Quote-unquote, "What the hell?" Quote-unquote, "Holy shit, man." Quote-unquote, "That was too scary." Quote-unquote, "Do not play. It is not what you think it is," and many other posts along the same topic. The post was removed a few months later because of the public reaction to the game. Also, the Mediafire file is no longer available, because the original uploader's account was shut down. What you are about to read is a description of the game. The information gained about the game was received from the various users of 4chan, who were unlucky enough to have downloaded the game. In order to start the game, you must extract the .rar file into any folder. Attempting to run the game's .exe file before doing so will result in an error message. Once extracted, the game can be launched by clicking ed_ed_n_eddy the_game.exe. The game will automatically enter full screen and cannot be closed unless you press Alt F4, close it with a task manager, or pressing the exit button in the game. The game starts as what appears to be a poorly designed fan game. The title screen is an edit of a screen cap of the show, and the words "play game," "exit game," and "the game" are edited onto it, more than likely using Microsoft Paint. The play game and exit game are clickable, and they do exactly what they say. Starting the game will jump to a black screen with a few black areas to enter information. The game asks the player for their name, their cell phone number, and the player's address. The game states at the top of the screen that entering any of the information wrong will remove from the experience of the game. Once the player enters their info, they can begin the game by pressing a button that says play at the bottom of the screen. Pressing it will throw the player straight into the game. The game is in a first-person perspective, the player starts on the sidewalk of a poorly designed 3D cul-de-sac. The in-game music is an endless loop of the Ed, Edd and Eddy opening song, and at the bottom of the screen, there is white text that acts as a dialogue box for the game. As soon as the game begins, the white text reads, quote, "Step right up and try our all-new magic trick. Only 25 cents. Unquote. The game doesn't give the players any directions of how to play the game, so they must fiddle with the keyboard until they figure out the controls. WASD are used to control movement, the spacebar is used to jump, and moving the mouse moves the camera. Movement is slow, and jumping is floaty. It doesn't go very high. Once the player figures out how to control the game, they'll eventually move toward the middle of the cul-de-sac, where a few characters and other objects are visible. In the center of the cul-de-sac are flat models of Ed, Eddy, Double D, Jimmy, Kevin, and Sarah. The models are the simple, flat models always facing the player no matter where the player stands. All of the characters are standing around a poorly designed model of what appears to be a rocket ship. Moving close to it causes a clip from the TV show to play. The clip is a scene from Season 2, Episode 3 of Ed, Edd and Eddy, called, quote-unquote, Ready, Set, Ed. The clip is a scene of Ed stuffing all the kids into their rocket car, and Eddy explains why Double D and Ed can't come with them. The clip's quality is poor, and it ends abruptly after Eddy finishes his explanation. After the clip ends, the player is back in control of the game, but now the player is in a small 3D box-like room. The player can't do anything at this point, but after 30 seconds or so, they will receive a text message on their phone. If they can receive messages, if not, the player must use Alt F4 to exit the game. The message will say, quote-unquote, type fast. The message is from a private number. It can't be messaged or called. Typing fast on the keyboard will cause the game to show another clip, but this time the clip is of an old crash test footage. The audio is missing during the clip, and no sounds are playing. The footage plays once, then freezes on the last frame. Pressing any button on the keyboard will cause the game to return to play mode, but this time, all of the textures of the box's room are replaced with the final frame of the car crash scene. In the middle of the room, Eddy and Double D stand next to each other. Approaching the two will make the white text on the bottom of the screen change to say, "We killed them, Eddy. I know, you idiot. Oh my goodness, think of their families. No, you moron. Think of the quarters." After a few seconds, the textures of the room will be replaced with pure black, and the text, quote-unquote, "You will pay for your sins." Then, the game will freeze for a little bit, and put the player in a new room. This new room is a long, pure black hallway. After being in this room for a little bit, the player will receive a text message saying, quote-unquote, "Run." Some players wouldn't know what to do at this point and quit. Other players will type the word "run" and the game would play a voice clip of Double D crying that was taken directly from the show, and the Ed, Edd and Eddy opening music would stop playing. The white text at the bottom of the screen would now read, quote-unquote, "Run." If the player looks to one side of the hallway, they will notice a flat model of Double D slowly getting closer. But this wasn't the same Double D model from earlier. Double D was now black and white. His eyes were now edited to be black and red, and he had no mouth. Touching Double D at this point of the game would immediately cause the game to crash. Players that touched Double D have claimed to have heard footsteps outside of their rooms, even if they lived alone. If the player moves away from Double D, when they have reached the end of the hallway, the game will freeze and move to another location. This new area was a very tall room. The room wasn't very wide, but it went up very high, The white text at the bottom of the screen will now read, quote-unquote, "Tap the spacebar." Tapping the spacebar will cause the player to constantly jump, and the player can now fly upward by tapping the spacebar. After a few seconds, a wide brown polygon will appear at the bottom of the map and slowly move upwards. Touching it will crash the game, but if the player flies all the way up to the top of the room, the game will change locations one last time. The player is where they started the game, in the cul-de-sac, but now, nobody is in the center of it. Only a guillotine stands in the middle of the cul-de-sac. The white text now says, quote-unquote, "End this horrible game now." But if the player does not touch the guillotine within 1 minute, they will receive 17 text messages that all say, "End it." If the player idles any longer, they will receive a phone call. If they answer it, they will hear a reversed version of the Ed, Ed, and Eddy opening. And once it finishes, they'll hear a man yell at the top of his lungs. Touching the guillotine leads the player to a menu screen that says, quote-unquote, "Congratulations, you beat Ed, Ed, and Eddy the game. You will receive the making of DVD soon. Thanks for playing," along with a button that allows the player to quit the game. And that is the end of the game. If the player looks into the game's files after you beat the game, they'll notice a new .jpg file called, quote-unquote, "Buttered Toast." It is a black and white photograph of an autopsy. The .exe for the game is also missing now. After the player beats the game, they'll receive a package about 3 or 4 months later. Only the first 50 players that beat the game received this package. According to a player that received it, the box was small, but smelled extremely bad. The cardboard on the small package was also wet, according to a player that received it. Within the package is a blank CD with, quote-unquote, "The making of Ed, Ed, and Eddy the game," written on it with Sharpie. If a player loads the disc into a computer, they will find a .mp4 file called, quote-unquote, "The making of." The file is a video. The video starts off with the Ed, Ed, and Eddy opening sequence. After this, a white screen with the words, quote-unquote, "The make Ed of the game." The screen remains like this for a few seconds, then cuts to the crash test scene featured in the game. The clip now has sound, but remains quiet until the car hits the wall. Once it does, the video will start playing screams that are so loud they can break the player's speakers. Pausing the video here does not stop the screams, and the video will force the computer to shut down after it ends. Players that watched the video have had strange occurrences afterwards. They will tend to hear their phone ring, even though nobody is calling. Some players claim to hear the reversed version of the Ed, Ed, and Eddy opening from far away as an echo. When some players sleep, they'll wake up abruptly to the sound of footsteps or a sound of somebody whispering, quote-unquote, "End it," although nobody is around. Some people even claim that all of the files on their desktop were replaced with the game's executable file. The game is no longer available on the internet, and the creator of the game still remains unknown. The end. And that was Ed, Ed, and Eddy the game, written by Relzar123. I would say in totality that this creepypasta is not very impressive, but it is at least mostly inoffensive, as you were no doubt able to tell by the quote-unquote gameplay from the creepypasta game. This game does actually exist, but just as you've seen it for yourself, chances are you'll agree, it isn't particularly creepy. In fact, very many elements of this creepypasta seem rather random and nonsensical. In particular, the voices that people hear as well as footsteps. It ruins what was an otherwise very decent internet-based creepypasta. As strange as it may sound, I personally enjoyed the parts of the story where the player receives text messages, and even at the end, when the player receives a mysterious package from the assumed creator of this game. Of course, I don't know anybody dumb enough to give out their personal information on 4chan of all places, but considering there was a recent YouTube trend of ordering things from the deep web, I can't say it's horribly unrealistic in that regard. However, I'm sure you may have already deduced what the main issue of this story was. Put simply, this game doesn't have anything to do with Ed, and Eddy. Aside from a creepy modified show clip and some creepy in-game models, this game could have been based off of anything and been the exact same. This could just as easily have been a Kids Next Door or Chowder creepypasta. If a couple of details were modified, this story could literally fit any cartoon ever made ever. The story tries to introduce a very poorly explained creepypasta plot of Ed and Double D killing the neighborhood children in their rocket car. But as you'll have heard, this plot doesn't even go anywhere. The character is simply put in a bunch of random rooms and run away from JPEGs and then is texted stuff. It's all kind of ridiculous. Honestly, if this pasta wasn't written in the internet journalism format that I enjoy oh so much, I simply wouldn't have given it the time of day. Although, for what the creepypasta lacks in plot and, logic, it more than makes up for in evidence media. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to play the game that was featured in this creepypasta. Although, personally, I wouldn't waste the whole 25 megabytes of space. You can see the whole thing for yourself right here. But at the end of the day, after reading this, Ed didn't jump out of my computer and beat me to death with a piece of buttered toast. So at the very least it isn't as generic as other creepypastas may be. Thank you very much for watching or listening to this installment of Kachimuchi's Game and Spooks. Why not do us a kindness and leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to perform a head-to-toe assessment on Double D, if you know what I mean. This has been Kachimuchi, and that's about all I have to say about that. Farewell.
You may take it or leave it at that, I don't care, I'm just gonna survive.